how about the New Orleans Saints? Will they trade for Jimmy Garoppolo? And let me just make the case first before you say one way or another. The case would be, obviously they're not going to do it now, but they're going to give Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill a shot this year. I'm thinking they're probably going to go with Taysom Hill, but one way or another, if one guy struggles, the other guy will get a chance. If both guys kind of flop and neither one looks like the franchise quarterback, Jimmy played well against them. His arm strength wouldn't be as big of an issue in the dome. Same thing that happened with Drew Brees. He went to the
Eastern
same school.
Illinois.
He went to the same school as Sean Payton. That's the pitch. Good offensive line, good team. I mean, they can prop him. He doesn't make other players better, but they can make him better.
Yeah, so
and he might be an upgrade over Taysom Hill.
Yeah, the same system makes sense, right? Like that's a system Jimmy Garoppolo can play in, and that's a coordinator that would be able to utilize his best skill sets, which is being able to throw with bodies around him and his very quick release, right?
Yes.
Those are his two skill sets that fits exactly with what Sean Payton does on offense. It all makes sense. They have Michael Thomas, who, whenever he's healthy, is a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Alvin Kamara is a baller. You talked about a great offensive line, good defense too. Really, they've had a good defense the last 3 years. Dennis Allen's a good coordinator, but I think it goes back to a point of which we talk about in a different show. I just don't think Sean Payton's bought into having a pocket quarterback anymore. I think a lot of his love interest with Taysom Hill is the fact that
I think a lot of offensive coaches are like this right now, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The things that you can do with the quarterback in the run game has changed everything. Yes. And I think Sean Payton's very intrigued by it. If Sean Payton was into, I mean, can we be honest about something real quick? Drew Brees is probably the best case scenario for a quarterback who, especially his last years, with waning arm strength and waning mobility, he's the best case scenario because of how accurate and smart he is, right? Garoppolo at any point in his career is not going to be as mature or accurate or smart as Drew Brees the last 2 years.
And he still wasn't good enough.
Drew Brees was the reason that Saints team has not won a Super Bowl in the last 4 years. Yeah. Let's be honest about it.
He was never good in the playoffs. I mean,
he did not play well. He did not play well.
Even
the
at
Saints
home.
had the best roster in the NFL over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And you can talk about Bill Vinovich not making the call. Drew Brees was pathetic versus the Rams in that game. He was awful. He was terrible in overtime in that game. The first game, the Minnesota Miracle, the year before, the Saints had a really good roster. Maybe a bit too young to not make it. Drew Brees played really bad against the Vikings in the first half of that game. He was terrible versus Kirk Cousins and the Vikings 2 years ago. And he was awful versus the Bucs last year. Drew Brees did not play well in the playoffs. So if you're Sean Payton, right, you've stayed at New Orleans over an extended period of time, and you're trying to win a Super Bowl, right? And why would you bring in now Garoppolo and try to rerun a worse thing of what hasn't worked the last 4 years? They went 3-1 with Taysom Hill last year, albeit one game was against Deshaun Hamilton starting. Is that his name? The wide receiver who played quarterback? He started one game for Denver in that.
Yeah.
And they did lose a game to Jalen Hurts, which is rough. But Taysom Hill, I mean, all the stats people love, but they don't use him with Taysom Hill. He completed 70% of his passes last year.
He did.
70%.
His numbers look good. His numbers look good, yeah.
Yeah. He had you go down his passing stats, like I'm not saying Taysom Hill's a good quarterback, but the stats people use to make arguments for other quarterbacks, if you apply it to what Taysom Hill did in his short stint starting last year, then there should be no reason why he shouldn't be given a chance. And maybe there's this possibility that he could be pretty good. So honestly, just looking at it, I think New Orleans, the fact that Payton seems intrigued by the quarterback run game, the fact that, even though Garoppolo is probably a better quarterback than both Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, there's no doubt about that. But then when you take into account price, you take into account fit, you take into account the fact that at some point the Saints are going to have to answer this quarterback question or this salary cap situation that they keep pushing down the road with in a million of different creative ways. And when they do have to answer that, you don't want the albatross that is Jimmy Garoppolo's contract.
Yeah, let's be real clear. They can't trade for Jimmy anytime soon.
Yeah.
This would have to be next year after some creative ways to, because they have no cap. They have like $8 in cap space.
Right.
Yeah.
And we are talking from the scenario. Somebody said Teddy has, or DSF 49ers said Teddy won games. Yeah. Teddy Bridgewater went 5-0. Yeah. He didn't just win games. He went 5-0. We also talked about the thing that also, and I want to keep saying it because people will miss it, is that we are talking about the scenario that he gets traded, not gets cut. If he gets cut,
and that could happen too.
Yeah, this changes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so New Orleans Saints, we're saying most likely not. What I think what's interesting is the idea that maybe an offensive coach wouldn't want Jimmy Garoppolo in 2021, 2022. Maybe the kind of coach who would appreciate him, his wins, his big picture success is a defensive coach.
Yeah, a leader.
Something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Right, leader.
Yeah.
You know, like people talk about his leadership, likability, all of those things. A defensive coach might view that maybe. Now we're getting more into a little bit of the emotional part of football, and it's always difficult to project those type things. But I think that does make sense.
Yeah. So who do you think will be the quarterback for the Saints in 2022? Best guess.
I think it'll be Taysom Hill.
I think it'll be Taysom Hill too. I think Sean Payton's so committed.
That's one thing. The other thing is I think the Saints are going to make the playoffs. Like, what about the Saints roster has gotten that much worse from last year to this year? It's still stacked top to bottom. Sean Payton is still calling the plays. They went 3-1 with Taysom Hill last year. And if you think the quarterback is that much of a drop-off, you did not watch a lot of Drew Brees last year. I mean, Drew Brees struggled versus the 49ers last year. He was awful in that game.
He was awful, and so was Jameis Winston, in my opinion. San Fran 49er fan says Hill can only read one side of the field at a time. Winston will be quarterback one. What do you think?
How many sides of the field does Garoppolo read at the time?
Does Winston read any sides of the field?
No, Winston does. The thing with Winston, look, I don't care if Winston's QB1, and obviously Winston's kind of a crappy person, so it's difficult to root for him because he has had some ugly instances in his past that, you know, you shouldn't root for somebody like that. But the one thing I will say is when you look at Winston's talent and the things that he can do occasionally, there are enough plays in a game. I mean, even if you go back to him on the Bucs, where Jameis Winston looks like a legitimate top 10 quarterback in the NFL with the way he moves through his progressions, the way he's able to anticipate and know where to go with the football and ultimately making a big time throw down the field. Like, he's capable of doing that. The problem is there's enough plays in the game where Jameis Winston doesn't look like a guy that should ever be starting in the NFL.
Yeah, he loses too many games for you. Yeah.
Right. And if you want to make the assumption that Sean Payton is somehow going to be able to fix that issue, and let's say he does, then the Saints will have a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, and this conversation will be absolutely.
But you just have to remember, they're coming from a place where they can go 5-0 with Teddy Bridgewater, so they don't need super firepower at quarterback. They need a dude who won't commit 30 turnovers.
Right.